Hi, it's Sammy here from the Art2Ride Associate Trainers Programme, and this is Paddy. This is our second submission video so far, and I'd like to show you how much we've improved within the last 2 months. So we start off here with a little bit of work in hand. You can see he's walking, stretching nice and consistently, and he's walking nice and active. Now, one thing I've noticed from watching this video is when I'm asking him, for example, for a leg yield, what he does is he, instead of stepping over and under with his hind leg, he makes a beeline for the fence and walks diagonally. And I don't think it helps. With me, I tend to have a little bit of a habit of walking a little bit ahead of his shoulder, which you can see right there. So I think that blocks him a little bit, and you can also see this when I'm asking him for a little bit of a shoulder fall, which I do coming along as he goes past here. I start to ask him a little bit, and he doesn't really respond to it. Now, on that day I thought he was, but from watching this video it doesn't look like his hind leg is coming up and underneath him when I ask him to. Now, I know he can definitely do this. From when I'm riding him, he does it very well. So it's obviously something I'm doing wrong, which I have to figure out how to correct myself. So that's it for this rein. I was quite happy with that. And you can see here that when I stop him in a minute, that he has actually started to stand square on his front. Now, he doesn't do it all the time, he doesn't do it every single time, but the fact that he started doing this without me practicing stopping or practicing any transitions, it's proof in the pudding, really, that just by getting a horse to work over its back, that a lot of these things improve on their own. So you can see as we start on the right rein, I'm just starting to build up a little bit of activity with him. That's always a thing with him, is getting him active enough, because he's more of a lazier type, that he likes to use as little energy as possible. So I do have to sort of nag him a little bit. Now you can see he gets nice and active right here, and you can see he's starting to overtrack, which what that basically means is his hind legs, his hind hoofs, are stepping over the hoof print which is left by the front leg. That's what a overtrack is. You can see as we're walking down here, I'm asking him for a bit of a leg yield, and he doesn't really step over and under. He makes a beeline for the fence, diagonally. So I've got to try and find a way of of improving that. So we come along here. You can see he's stretching nice and consistently. I do try and do the leg yield again, which this time he does improve. See there, he's starting to step over and under, but then here he sees the fence and makes a beeline for it, and I don't really correct him for it. But because he's done a few strides where it was pretty good, that was an improvement from the first time, so I don't practice that again. I don't try that again, because that was an improvement, and that's all we look for. We don't look for perfection all the time. If we did that, I think we'd go slightly crazy. So I ask him a little bit for a shoulder fall going down here. Now, he does this a lot easier on the right rein than he does on the left, so he resists a little bit there. He comes behind the bridle, so I just push him on a little bit, and there he stretches again, which is good. So I think I'd try that again, because he did resist a little bit halfway through. So he'll come along. You can see he's still got that head bob going on, which is looking quite nice. And see there, that's better. See, he is stepping under with his right hind leg. Resists just a tiny bit, but massive improvement, so there's no need to try that again. See, I asked him to go straight after that because he did very well then from the beginning. So I walk him around here. Again, he's still nice and active. And you can, when the camera meets with the pony, there we go. So what I've started doing with him, when I work him in hand, I'll actually bring him down the diagonal and I'll try and stop him round about somewhere around X, just so that when I do change the rein, I can just go straight, as if you're changing the rein when you're riding. It's just a lot easier for me. So that's it for work in hand. I think he did pretty well there. So we're now going to try a little bit of Piaffe, which himself, he has improved quite a lot with this. Meaning he no longer wants to run through my hands. So he's a lot calmer and a lot more relaxed. So if you pause the video here when he's standing still, you can see, if you have a good look at him, you can see that his back is nice and straight. It's almost straight, there's still a little while to go. And you can see his neck muscles are pretty well defined here. So that's another way he's improved. So here I start asking him. He responds straight away, which is what I like. So I just keep pushing, because I want a nice... what I want is a diagonal pair to move up and forward now. So instead of him just lifting it up, I want him to move it slightly up and forward. See here, he's not quite listening there. And he moves forward a little bit there. So I don't give him a treat every time he does it. I give him a treat when he does it good. So you can see, there we go. So give him a little stroke there, a little fuss. Now when he backs up, I don't do anything about it. I don't increase the pressure, I just keep asking the question. I keep asking the same question, because what he's trying to do at the moment is he's trying to figure out in his head what he can do to make me stop tapping him on the bum with the whip. So by keeping on asking the question, he will learn that that's not the right answer. So he gave me quite a good diagonal pair then, so I stopped the session and then I'm getting ready to lunge him. Now, I have since tried the Piaffe work again with him, and I was able to push him a lot more. I'm a bit gutted he didn't do this in the video. This was taken about a week ago, both the lunging and the in-hand work. So what's gone on since then is I was able to push him a little bit more, and he actually hopped from one hind leg to the other. Now, in the same session, I tried that again just to check it wasn't a fluke, and he did it again. So he is starting to progress. He is starting to relax into it, which is always nice to see. Anyway, so in this lunging video, you'll see that I do struggle to get him active enough, which is always a big thing. It's a lot easier to get him active when I'm riding him and when I'm working in hand. He has a little bit of a tendency to ignore the lunge whip, which doesn't help matters. He is gradually getting better and better at it, which is good, that he is improving. That's always what we want to look for. Now, first of all, I'd like to say that this arena is 22 metres long, 22 metres wide, sorry. And I'm not really used to working in here, because you're not really allowed to lunge in there. But thanks to the weather being so bad, and the sand paddock where I usually lunge him was completely flooded, so it wasn't really safe to work him in there. So I asked permission first, obviously. So you'll see that I struggle personally to maintain a decent circle. Now, I would have liked to use the full 22 metres, but it's a big struggle for me because I struggle to see a circle and to walk in a circle. So you can see he's working in the trot now. He could be a little more active, which he does get further along towards the end of the video. He gives me a nice trot there. But you'll see that when I do flick and tap him a little bit, he has a bit of a tendency to flick his head and then ignore me. So that's something we're working on a little bit, that I have to sort of get a little more firm with the whip to get a response out of him. But as time goes on, he gets better and better with it, so it's not a massive problem. So you can see he responded a little bit there with a head flick, moved forward for a step, for a few strides, moved a bit more active for a few strides, and then went back to a more lazier trot. And again, got a little more of a response out of him, and then back to the lazier trot. So you can see from moving him, if you look at his hocks, they're not really making a full circle. They're more of an oval shape. See, he told me off a little bit there because I got a bit firmer with the whip. So all I did when I told him off was just pushed him on a little bit. Don't want to let him get in the habit of telling me off. But that's just as much as he gets. But out of all that, we did get more activity, so just a little bit too much to begin with. But he did respond, which I was happy with that. So you can see his hocks are starting to make a better shape now that he's had his little bit of a tantrum. But again, he could still be a little more active there. Now, I didn't realise at first when I was actually lunging him, it's only by watching this video that I went, oh, okay, he's not quite active enough. But also I have lunged him since this video was taken, and I found that with the canter work especially, you'll see that in this video he was not active enough at all. You can see as he's cantering now, how his hind legs are not stepping underneath him. He's pulling himself along with his shoulders, so when he does try to stretch, the canter falls apart a little bit. He's not able to stretch properly. So, but since I've lunged him, again, since I've realised that by having him a lot more active than this, he finds the stretch a lot easier. You see his trot improved after that first canter there. He's a little more active there, which is good. And he always likes to give a nice deep stretch, which is the best thing. It's very nice to look at when they're stretching properly and moving nicely. So that's a nice stretch there as he comes past. He's starting to pull his abdominal muscles up, which means he's starting to really lift his back again. You see there he responded again with a bit of a head flick and not much else. So I ask him to canter. He starts off on the wrong leg, so I call him back down straight away, which he is of a pony. You can ask him for a downwards transition very, very easily. He pretty much does it straight away. So I ask him again. He strikes off on the correct lead this time. But you can see again, he's not active enough. You can see how when he tries to stretch, the canter kind of falls apart. It's very difficult for him because he's not moving active enough. He's sort of stabbing the ground with his front legs as he moves. So it's very awkward for him, although he is trying. He's trying his very best there. So you can see how his trot here is getting a lot better. He gave me a really nice trot after that canter. So that's what I was looking for. So I brought him back to walk again. So I'm just asking him for a little more activity in the walk. Because what he likes to do is do a bit of a snail's pace after he's done a little bit of work. So just keeping him moving, active, stepping under with his hind leg. So I do have to nag him quite a bit. But you see, as he gave me a nice walk there, I stopped him, and that's it for that rein. That's all I was looking for. And you can see as I approach him to change directions. I don't drop the whip or the lunge line anywhere. I keep the whip behind me. Just for safety reasons, really. We don't really want to be dropping the lunge line, especially because if your horse suddenly spooked and run off or something, they can get tangled in the line, and we could get tangled in it as well, and it would just be mayhem. So you can see as well when I lunge him, because he is consistently stretching, I don't really use any aids when I do lunge him. I just use a bridle, lunge line and a lunge whip. So you can see the lunge line runs directly through the bit and over his head, behind his ears, and clips to the other side. And I do this personally to avoid pulling the bit through the mouth, especially as on the right rein, when I ask him to canter, he has a tendency to pull to the outside, because he does struggle. He does find it a lot more difficult. So that way it's a lot easier. But however, if I'm using side reins on him, for example, if I'm bringing him up into the working gait, then I do tend to, if I remember, I tend to just clip it onto the inside rein. It helps me give him a little more direction, asking for a little more bend. It just makes it a lot more simpler for him. But that's if I remember. I do tend to forget because I have 3 other horses to work in a day, and they all work with the lunge line over their heads. So you can see he's really starting to walk quite actively there, so I ask him to trot, which he could be more active there, so I'm just nagging him a little bit, asking him to move a little bit, which he does quite nicely. Now that he's nice and warmed up, he is moving a lot better. Again, he still could be a little more active. So he is a little bit distracted by something there. I think the yard owner's just turned up, so he was having a good look, just being nosy, which is fine. All I do when he gets a little bit distracted is push him on a little bit. See, that trot's very nice right there. I just push him on a little bit and he comes right back. He doesn't blow his mind at anything. He's a pretty calm, relaxed boy anyway. See, that trot's very nice there. I like it. So I ask him to canter and he goes straight into it. But you can still see that it's still not active enough. He's still not stepping under with his hind legs. He's still stabbing the ground with his front feet, which makes the stretch a lot harder. And so to try and balance himself, he's using my hand and the lunge line to try and balance. So he pulls to the outside to try and help him balance, because he's not active enough and he's not using his hind legs properly. Which I suddenly figured out, I think it was yesterday or the day before when I lunged him last. See, that's a nice trot there. So ask him to canter again. You see how when I ask him to canter, he brings his hind quarters towards me in the transition, which is just a little bit, he's not being naughty in any way. it's just a lack of balance. Doesn't quite know what he's doing with his body when he's cantering quite yet. But this is improving every single time I work with him. So that's always what we want to look for, is that we get just little bits of improvements every time we work our horses. See, that's a lovely trot right there. But we want to improve just on something, even just a little bit, every time we work with the horses. You can see he's starting to become a little more regular back then in his rhythm. So that was pretty nice. So I asked him back to walk again. You can see he's starting to bob his head along, which is starting to look nice. I'm just nagging him a little bit to walk a little more active, because he wanted to go at a snail's pace again. You can see a little bit of foam developing in his mouth, just a little bit in the corners, which is always nice to see, because he never develops too much, because he's never ridden against the hand, he's never forced. Usually when you get a lot of froth in the mouth and they kind of look like a broken washing machine, it's usually because they can't swallow. So all of the froth just comes out and out and out. They can't swallow, they can't move their tongue, because the bit is that tight on their mouth, on their tongue, that they can't move it to swallow. So anyway, this riding part of the video was taken a week after that, as you can probably tell, because the son's got his hat on. Now, we'd already started, I'd already started warming him up for about 10 minutes before this video started. Unfortunately, wasn't able to capture that with the camera because it was being a little bit on the temperamental side, which was a massive shame, because we've been practicing a little bit of half pass in the walk, which he's starting to do really well. But never mind, there's always next time. There's always next time to show you. So here I have him walking in a working walk now, after 10 minutes of warming up. And you can see on my hands, my contact isn't that great. His contact is actually doing pretty well, considering. What I could do to improve here was to bring my hands slightly closer together and higher up, because when they're down and wider than they should be, it's sort of giving him mixed signals, because when I ask him to stretch, I widen my hands. I sort of open the door and let him down. So with me having my hands wide here, you can see as I do it in a second, he sort of tries to go down and goes, oh, actually, I can't. Oh no, I was actually asking him to stretch. Okay then. But you'll see later on in this video that he tries to stretch down when I have him in a working frame. That's a nice stretch right there. And you can also see, since the last video, my position when I'm riding is a lot better. I'm able to sit straighter in the saddle, and as a result my legs fall into a better place. And this is mostly down to doing a lot of exercises whilst he's not been in work. He's had about a month off work. So as well as doing this jump rope challenge, I've been doing some exercises to unlock my hips. So you'll see that our lateral work, for example, the leg yield, the shoulder fore, shoulder in, is much better than what it was in the last video, because I've managed to unlock my hips a little bit, especially my right hip, and I'm able to bring my outside leg back a little easier. So it's always good to do these little exercises, because it'll help strengthen you as a rider. So you can see as he's trotting and occasionally stretching, he was a little bit resistant in this video. He felt a little bit tired, a little bit stiff through his back on that day. So I decided to just give him a short session, and then I turned him out for the day. But you can see here in the leg yield, he didn't quite respond straight away, but it wasn't that bad. You could see that I was able to bring my outside leg back behind the girth. So I'll just try that again, and you'll see as he comes up here, my outside leg is able to come back a little bit more, not as much as I want it to, but enough to get him to step over and under with his hind leg, which is what he did then, and I was quite happy with that. So no need to try that again. Now I changed the rein here and ask him to open his stride a little bit, and he does that quite well, and then I kind of ruin it by swapping my whip over to the other hand, which is fair enough. Now that's a nice stretch right there. He's starting to move really nicely, so I'm very happy with that. See, when he stretches, he lets the entire length of his neck out, and as a result, his whole body, his whole movement becomes so much better. You can see here, his leg yield is a lot better. I'm really happy with that leg yield. He responded quite well, but he took a little while to respond, but once he did, it was good. So there was no need to repeat that at all, because it was an improvement from the last time I rode him. I asked him to lengthen his stride there a little bit, but he decided canter was easier. Which, as long as he's moving, I'm happy. So you can see his rhythm is starting to become a lot more regular now that he's a little warmer. That's always something I like to see with him. So here I try a little bit of a shoulder four. Now, it was a little bit resistant to begin with, mostly because my inside rein was flapping about like no tomorrow. But it was pretty good, so I didn't try that again. So I'm going to try it again on the other rein. And this is where he's really starting to improve, because before we did struggle to do shoulder fours and shoulder ins on the left rein. The right rein was always easier for him. But more recently, he started to do it a lot easier, a lot better. So that's one way he's improved quite a lot. So that one was the best he's ever done so far, so I didn't ask him for that again. So you see how I bring him up into a working trot here. There wasn't much change in his body at all. The only thing that changed was his head and neck came up. Again, my hands are too low and too wide there. Especially here, because it looks like I'm sort of pulling him around the circle, which isn't really what we want to do. We want the horses to follow our own movement and position of our legs, which that's what turns the horse. It's not the reins that turns the horse, it's our body. So I do another leg yield here. Again, this was another improvement. He did really well going across there. I was quite happy with that. Very happy with that, actually. So I'm just trying to... So for some reason I do that again, and it wasn't as great as the first time. So... oh well. It must have felt a lot better than the first time for some reason. So I opened his stride up a little bit more, going across the diagonal there, and he responded really well to that. I was really happy with that. That's something he started to do a lot easier, is to open his stride up. And you can see as well, when he really stretches down as well, and he's actually starting to bounce a little bit more in his trot. Whereas before, when I first started training him, according to Art2Ride, his trot was quite flat. There was no moment of suspension at all. There was no thrust. And he has started to develop a little bit more thrust, which I was very happy about. See there, I just tried the leg yield again, because the first time I did it then, I blocked him from stretching, so I had to sort of do it again to correct my mistake. So you can see here, he's in a working trot again. Again, nothing changed in his body between the stretch and the working trot, which is always something that we look for. You see he has a little too much neck bend there. But he soon straightens that out a little bit and bends through his body, which is always something we look for, is that they bend through the body and not just the neck, because that's not bend if they just move the neck. So I think we're staying in the working trot, going across diagonal here. You can see again my contact with my hands is quite sloppy, which makes his contact a little bit sloppy. His contact as a whole is actually very good when I lunge him. When I took him to the clinic back in September, Will suggested that I stuck to lunging for a couple of weeks and just working on bringing him up, and I managed that for about a week and a half before bad weather set in, and then he grew such a massive coat, woolly coat, that I couldn't actually work him for about a month before I was able to clip him. So we're cantering here again. You can see he's much more balanced than the first time. So he's doing a nice circle. Funnily enough, he stretched much better then when I brought my hands closer together to change the whip over. So maybe that's something I can try ready for next time, is to see if he stretches better in the canter with my hands closer together. So this is the most amount of canter work I've done with him on one rein. So I've done about 2 circles and then gone down the straight, but because he went a little bit crooked, I decided to try and circle him again, see if he straightened out, and he did. And then he stretched really nice going along the long side, and I brought him back to trot. So that was the best canter he's given me yet. So I was really happy with that. Now, he's always found the right canter a lot easier than the left, and you'll soon see that when we try the left rein. And it's also, I struggle with it as well, so that doesn't necessarily help. So I bring him back up into a working gait, and for some reason it helps me and my seat and also his balance to make the transition into canter whilst in a working frame, and then I let him down. For some reason he does better that way, and he finds it a lot easier. So it's waiting for him to get a little more consistent there. See, that was a little bit of a sloppy transition. He threw his head a little bit, but that was fine. Again, we don't practice transitions at all. He used to run into the canter, so the fact that he's going into canter as soon as I put my legs on, that itself is a massive improvement. Now, you can see here, he's not stretching at all this time on the left canter. And I think that's partly down to, well, mostly down to my hands. I'm not giving him clear enough signals, and it looks as though I'm actually pulling him around the circle with my left rein again. And my hands aren't quite, my outside rein isn't quite wide enough there. But when I'm on him, it sort of feels like he won't stay on the circle if I'm not pulling him around. He seems to struggle to stay on the circle when he's cantering. So I think that would improve in time as he gets better and better. You see he's starting to really stretch nicely there. So I bring him back to walk. Now that downwards transition, he sort of wanted to give me a bit of a crappy trot instead of going back to walk, so I had to sort of use my reins a little bit to help make that transition. So I think that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed watching, and thank you for watching. Bye-bye. Hi, it's Sammy here from the Art2Ride Associate Trainers Programme, and this is